Hello everyone, this is meteorologist Luebcke-Eckstein. This is October 5th. I'm going to give a quick update, well, hopefully quick. I always say that in this number quick, but on the weather for the October 14th annular eclipse across the western United States. You'll be able to see in a solar eclipse, a partial eclipse across the whole entire United States and Canada, I think most of Canada at least, um, and I don't think Alaska actually. But the annular part, the antibrone of the annular eclipse will be across the western United States, where you'll actually be able to see the ring of the sun, as they call it, the ring of fire, around the moon on October 14th in the morning. So I'm starting here with showing the Pacific Ocean because it is one where the weather comes from west to east, and two, since it's visible in since the antimbra, the path of the annular part of the eclipse is in the western part of the country, from Oregon down to southeast Texas here. So we're 9 days out now. It gets a little closer to what we, it's a little closer to the event, so it's a little easier now to forecast than it was before, but the general pattern is still the same as what I've been looking at for a while. And you'll see that as well with pretty much a ridge over either the Rockies or the high plains, possibly over the west coast, but it's more likely going to be over the Rockies or just to the east of the Rockies. But there's still a lot to be ironed out over the west. But one thing we're watching, I think this is what, 48 hours from now. So let me go back to the current time. So this is the European model. This is actually it's from this morning at noon London time, so this morning here in the United States. One thing we're watching is this low pressure system currently in northern Japan. So now that we have some observations in Asia, and we're seeing this low is going to play a part in where exactly and how exactly things set up across the United States, the western part of the United States. Right now we have this ridge building in over the west coast. So here on the west coast where I am, we're getting some very warm and sunny days here for the next few days across the Pacific Northwest. Not too unusual for October in recent years, but relative to the long-term average, it is unusual, but not for recent years. So let's watch this low pressure system as I go through time here. Just keep an eye on that as I go through time. So this is now this weekend here, and then I'll just stop it probably right around early next week. So this is now early Monday morning. This is Monday morning. The low pressure system I told you to keep an eye on is here, moving slowly eastward across the Pacific Ocean. We have these low pressure systems in this cool air congregating here in the Gulf of Alaska. It's bringing a cold front. If you look at these black lines where they kind of surge south, that's where the cold front is, into the northwest. So we're getting rain being brought back into the northwest early next week on Monday. And we have a ridge set up. I'll talk about this upper low here later, but it's actually an upper low. If I were to go back to the beginning, if you were to go back a little bit, there's an upper low kind of set up across the eastern part of North America. It's really just going to kind of sit there all week and get cut off and not really move. And that's kind of what's going to force this pattern, this ridge, to be able to set up to its west over the Rockies or high plains. And any systems from the Pacific might start falling apart a little bit as they run into that ridge, but still bring clouds to the northwest. So I'll get into that, but let's keep watching this flow as I go forward into the future through next week. Again, this is the European model. Each model is going to be a little different here, as I'll show you But this is Wednesday, Thursday. Now, okay, so let's go back a little bit. Okay, I'll go forward in time a little bit here because I want to show you. This is now Thursday, and then Friday morning. So Friday morning, here's that original low. So kind of tracked here and then starting to curve north, but it has a cold front here, and on the south side of that cold front, um, there's enough energy on the south side of this front that we might probably develop a second low down here. But here's our ridge kind of rebuilding off to um, just the east of the of the Pacific Northwest or the Northern Rockies. This upper low still kind of sitting over here. I'll go back in time to kind of show you that, but I'm going to go to North America to show you more of that. And then as we go into Saturday morning, here's that low that develops along that cold front to our south, and it's running into this ridge, which is rebuilding this big ridge. I can't even draw it very well apparently. This big ridge that is redeveloping over the Northern Rockies and High Plains. And here's the upper low across the eastern part of the country that just will not move, will not budge. So this low is going to determine a lot of the weather in the West, where exactly that energy gets cut off, where exactly this ridge can develop. So let me go back to North America here, and I'll show you some other differences in between models. But first of all, let me show you this upper low. So here's this morning, right there. We don't have this upper low actually over the eastern part of the country quite yet, but it's going to develop right around there. So as we have, I think it's still Tropical Storm Felipe. It could be a hurricane. I don't remember. Let's see. Whether I don't think it's expected to develop into a hurricane either. It's still Tropical Storm Felipe. No, it's not expected to develop in a hurricane, but basically it's going to be pulled. It's going to move north and then track and pretty much be pulled to northwest through Maine here. And you can see that on this European model, that storm being pulled off as we have all this cold energy moving down from Canada. And as that happens, this weekend, that it gets pulled into this circulation and it becomes this big, large cutoff low over the eastern part of the country. And that is pretty much, as I go forward in time here, you can see that pretty much sits over there, over the eastern part of the country all week. We get more energy. This rain that's moving into northwest here early in the week, right around here, actually moves southeast and develops a low. This is according to the European model down here, and then the southern plains, and then that gets pulled into that big circulation as well. But basically, we get this low pressure system in the eastern part of the country, right there, that pretty much sits there all week, and that allows these ridges to keep developing off to the west. And so this is that general pattern that I've been talking about for a while, and then this cool air in general moving over the North Pacific Ocean. So let's look at that's the European model. This is the U.S. model called the GFS, and this is currently, so there's that ridge over the west coast. This is actually for late tonight. The ridge over the west coast, that cooler air is starting to move down from Canada, and here's Felipe. It's going to get pulled into this system. So let me go forward in time here. You see Felipe, go and move right there. It's being pulled into that cool air moving down from Canada. It's going to form the upper low, and as that happens, we get this ridge off to the west. And as we go forward in time, here's that upper low now in the eastern part of the country. is a little bit further north than the European at the moment, but here's that cold front coming into the northwest here on Monday to bring rain, and that ridge forming off to the east of that. And the upper low pretty much sits there in southeast Canada. And there's that next low that formed from that energy that comes through the northwest here next Monday. It's a little further north than the European. Instead of kind of forming in the southern plains and then getting pulled in circulation, here the GFS model, the U.S. model, has it forming more here in the central plains around Kansas, and then getting pulled into that circulation. But that upper low is also low further north. So as we go further in time here, the upper low sits and forms a little further north than the European has it. And so the U.S. model has that ridge forming a little bit further west into parts of the Pacific Northwest here on Friday night, and this is actually Friday evening. And here's that low that formed at the southern end of that cold front. I'll go back in time here, and you see this. This is that low that we're watching that's currently moving off of the coast of Japan here in the next couple of days. This is going to track northeast into western Canada, Alaska Panhandle, and then on the south edge, on the south end of that cold front here, we're going to see this energy form, this next low form right there. It's right, so it's a secondary low that forms from that first one, that forms off the front of the first one. This one moves into British Columbia right there, and then this one is what we're watching for in terms of the weather out west here. So if we go forward to Saturday, this is actually Saturday morning at 4 a.m. West Coast time. Here's that low, and then here's our ridge to the east of it. All right, and then here's the upper low in the eastern part of the country. It's like I said, further north than the European model, but there's still all this cooler air moving down most of the south and most of the eastern part of the country. All right. If we look at the Canadian model, which I don't like looking at too much because it's often not correct, but here's the same situation. In the Canadian model, here's that low getting cut off a little bit slower. It has this ridge actually building along the west coast, and then here's the upper trough in the central to eastern part of the country. All right. Let's see. This is still 216 hours out, so many of these other models are not going to go out that far. Here's the Japan model. It's not as good resolution wise, but this is early Friday morning, the furthest it goes out, and we see early Friday morning. Here's that ridge starting to build on the west, the upper low in the east, and here's the energy down to the south. All right. Again, just the fact that we have this much agreement, that's the German model. The German model doesn't go out far enough. Just the fact that we have that much agreement 9 days out, is pretty amazing, actually, for to show you kind of how far weather models have come. All right, so I showed you the U.S. model. This is this I didn't show you before, but this is basically this is the GFS model, but it's all the ensembles, which I talked about before, all the different possible runs. This is early Saturday morning, the early morning of the eclipse, showing the general weather pattern basically. But we see this trough and this energy off the west coast. Here's the ridge, and then here's a trough in the eastern part of the country. So each of the individual models are actually agreeing a lot more than they've been in the past. But you see, some have this ridge a little bit further west, some have it a little bit further east. So the average is right around here. But there's still some disagreement as to where exactly that's going to form, and that's going to play a big part in, especially in the northwest here, even east over to like northern Nevada, for example, what the cloud cover might be like. So let me show you. These are actually. I just wanted to show you this just because these are um, actually they're not traditional computer models. They're actually machine learning, uh, artificial intelligence models, and so it's interesting. Some of these have actually shown some promise um, as to good forecasts, but I'll just show you what these show, but they basically have the same pattern here. Here's the red, and here's the East Coast upper level low here. There's one of them. There's a second one, a little more, a little sharper in the pattern here. Here's one trough right here. Here's that big ridge, but you see a little bit of a ridge right here, right over a trough. So um, this, oh, and then that big trough right here. So really, on this model, here's some energy down here, but anyway, the big East Coast low there. I'm not really talking much about each of these because they're um, just because they're artificial intelligence and anything. But this has a lot of energy moving into the West Coast right there on that one. All right. So let's go to this is the European model. Let me go to the European model again real quick on here. There are a lot of different places that you can view this. This is a site called tropicaltidbits.com. It was actually designed for um, tropical development. Oh, and one thing I wanted to show you too for the southeast, just because um, a lot of models have been hinting at some um, formation of a low of a weak low into the tropics here, and then moving out this way doesn't mean it can be a tropical storm or anything. Could be a depression, I guess, if there's enough circulation. But basically, they've been indicating late next week a lot of tropical moisture moving up through Florida and possibly a little bit into southeast Texas as well. But generally in this area, and I will mention that as well here. But so go into that's actually early Thursday morning, and then as we go into Saturday, right here. Actually, that low that I was just talking about has already moved out to here, but there's still a a plume of tropical moisture extending across the Floridian Peninsula here. All right, but this is anyway. This is I don't know what time this map's from. This is for 18Z, and I'll go back to that in a second. Show you what I'm talking about here. So European model has this low that got cut off. This energy on the south side of that previous cold front, just off the coast of Northern California, and a ridge here extending well north into Canada through the high plains and the northern Rockies. So this map I'm going to show you here. This comes from the European Center for Medium Range Forecasting, ECMWF. It's the same model. It comes from their charts page. So there are a lot of different maps on there that we can look at. But this is its model from the European model of that same time. This is when the eclipse is the highest off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula down in Mexico. This is its representation for cloud cover. It's forecast for cloud cover. We can go 6 hours earlier too, but it's easier just to go to. Let me scroll out a little bit so I don't have to change it. There you go. So this is that first image is about 5 hours before the eclipse, or 4 or 5 hours before the eclipse is. I think it's 4 hours. Is at maximum on the west coast. This one's about 2 hours after it. So this one's a little bit closer. But here, this is its representation for cloud cover. This cyan color represents high cloud cover. So it forecasts a lot of high cloud cover across the west coast. This is where it has the energy. That low off the coast of Northern California, I think it's actually a little bit shorter, a little bit closer, right there. Um, so it's bringing in all this high cloud cover in advance of that energy of that cold front. So you can actually see this cold front here. So let me actually explain what all these other colors are first before I go more into that. The brown is the low cloud cover, and blue, I think it's the blue, is the mid cloud cover. Let me go down here. You can see it. No, the magenta. Uh, sorry, I'm looking right here. I will undo the circle, but the brown's low cloud cover. Magenta is the middle level cloud cover, and then the cyan is the high cloud cover. The other colors are a mixture. So, okay, so this magenta right here is middle cloud cover. So when you see blue, that's a mixture of, I think, the magenta and the cyan. So middle and high cloud cover. Anyway, anywhere there's a color, there's some kind of cloud cover here. So we see in the eastern part of the country where it has this upper level low, it's forecasting all this cloud cover associated with it. A lot of low and mid cloud cover on the back side of that low, which is not surprising, especially for October. And the eastern part of the country here is all that tropical moisture. This is actually the low here that possibly forms in the Gulf of Mexico toward midweek and then moves off to the northeast. Again, doesn't mean that's a tropical storm. Might be weak and disorganized, but essentially a plume of tropical moisture coming off of here through Florida, through most of the Gulf of Mexico, into the Atlantic. Could possibly see a little bit of that down here southeast Texas along the Gulf Coast too, if it's a little further north. I mention that because southeast Texas is where the annular part of the eclipse exits the United States into the Gulf of Mexico. Could be a little bit iffy there if we get some of that tropical moisture up to the north. A lot of the eastern part of the country, Midwest, Northeast, probably very, very questionable in terms of cloud cover with that upper low that every model is indicating here. So I'm going to sit here and say, if you want to see a partial eclipse, probably not the northeast part of the country. The good thing is, for most people who live here, you're not expecting to see much anyway. It's not going to be a very big eclipse in this part of the country. The main eclipse path, as I said, goes from Central Oregon down here into southeast Texas, and I should probably use a different color for that, but which I will do. So you see that relative to everything that I'm talking about here. All right, so best chances right now for the eclipse viewing are going to be from central, possibly southeast Texas into Utah in that area at this point. Pretty good chance at seeing a partial solar eclipse wherever that ridge forms, whether it's going to be the Northern Rockies, Northern High Plains, or even to the northwest, but we don't know exactly yet, 9 days out, where that ridge is going to set up, but the agreement right now is that area. It's a little more iffy here from northwest Utah, or western Utah, northern Nevada into Oregon in the northwest, because it depends a lot on where that energy on that cold front in the Pacific sets up. So here's that cold front. As you see, this is you can see that those clouds there, and where we see a comma shaped, that's basically our low there that's starting to form with that cold front. All these clouds here are along the original cold front that's associated with that low that at this point I think has actually moved inland into the northwest. and then we have this energy that's starting to form along the south part of the cold front. The good thing is that this energy that forms on the south part of the cold front may actually slow this whole entire feature down a little bit, especially as it runs into this ridge. So that could help in terms of cloud cover in the northwest. But if we see all this high cloud cover moving here, that could potentially block the eclipse. I say potentially because high cloud cover can be pretty. If it's cirrostratus, which is basically a high layered cloud cover that covers the whole entire sky, you can still see the sun with a halo around it through the clouds. It's going to make the actual eclipse harder to view, but you might still be able to see a little bit. But if there are any breaks in the high cloud cover, then we could potentially see that, see the eclipse over parts of the northwest. Plus, even the European model, if you go just 12 hours later into Saturday night, it has a warm front starting to move here. This is actually Saturday afternoon into the northwest, and right around that, later that night, it actually has some, some skies, some clearing skies as this energy starts to come ashore along the immediate coast. And that could be important because if we can get a break right in that, if we can get timing in there, and again, this is 9 days away, so this isn't exactly how it's going to happen. But if we can get enough timing, the right timing somewhere in there, that low slows down a little bit, forms a little bit offshore. There are a lot of things that can happen. It comes down to these little details that we just can't know 9 days out. Then we might have a better viewing of the eclipse. So again, 9 days out, it's really hard to tell. And even this might not be exactly what happens off the coast here of the west coast. All right. What else? Oh, and then another issue could be, especially down in the valleys of west of the Cascades here, where it's a little more questionable. And I mentioned West Cascades. This is where it's going to happen a lot more. It's a lot more likely there could be fog that forms, especially like Seattle, places like Seattle, Portland, and then where the eclipse is visible. Sorry, where the annular part is visible in Western Oregon, like areas like Eugene, Corvallis, those areas west of the Cascades could have some fog there in the Willamette Valley. So that's going to be another issue west of the Cascades, whether we see that. And again, that is those are little details that we just can't pinpoint 9 days in advance. All right, so that's a brief little summary. 9 days, we'll see how it develops, but the general pattern is still looking the same, and details will continue to be refined as we get closer. All right, again, this is meteorologist Luebcke-Eckstein. Stay tuned for the next forecast, whenever that may be.